The harsh October wind carried the scent of blood and desperation across Garrett Xander's property line, moments before he spotted the woman staggering toward his fence. Her long dark hair whipped wildly behind her as she clutched a small bundle to her chest, each step more unsteady than the last. When she collapsed against the rough-hewn cedar posts that marked the boundary of his ranch, Garrett didn't hesitate, he ran. It was 1876 in El Dorado Canyon, Nevada, a place where fortunes were made in silver and lost in blood. Garrett had seen his share of both, but nothing prepared him for the sight of the young woman's face as he reached her, beautiful despite the dirt and exhaustion, with eyes that held more fear than he'd seen in all his years riding with the cavalry. "Help," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. "Please, my daughter." The bundle in her arms squirmed, revealing a small face no more than 6 months old. Garrett immediately shrugged off his sheepskin coat and wrapped it around both mother and child. "I've got you now," he said, his voice gentle but firm as he lifted her into his arms. "You're safe here." She was lighter than she should have been, this woman who appeared to have been running for days. Her clothes, once fine from what he could tell, were torn and dirty. The small gold locket around her neck seemed strangely out of place against her disheveled appearance. "Name's Garrett Xander," he said as he carried her toward the small but sturdy ranch house that had been his home for the past 3 years. "And you're on Shadow Creek Ranch now." "Olivia," she managed before her eyes fluttered closed. "Olivia Forrester." The baby began to cry, a thin, reedy sound that spoke of hunger and discomfort. Garrett quickened his pace, his mind racing. He'd handled wounded men, broken horses, and even delivered a calf or two in his time, but a woman and her infant daughter were territories as unfamiliar to him as the ocean. Inside the house, he laid her gently on his bed, making sure the child was secure beside her. Olivia stirred slightly, her eyes opening just enough to check on her daughter before closing again. "Rest now," Garrett said, pulling his warmest blanket over them both. "Nobody's gonna hurt you here." He stoked the fire in the small iron stove, put coffee on to boil, and rummaged through his cupboards for anything that might help. 3 years alone on this ranch had taught him to be self-sufficient, but he'd never felt more unprepared than he did now. The baby's cries grew louder. With hesitant hands, Garrett picked up the tiny girl, holding her awkwardly against his chest. Her face was red with effort, tiny fists balled tight. "SHH, little one," he murmured, pacing the floor of his small cabin. "Your mama needs rest and you need—" "Well, I reckon you need things I don't have." Olivia stirred at the sound of her baby's distress. "Water," she whispered. "And if you have milk." Garrett nodded, grateful for the direction. He set the baby beside her mother again and quickly poured a cup of water, adding a splash of the precious canned milk he kept for his coffee. Helping Olivia sit up enough to drink, he couldn't help but notice the bruises that circled her wrists, or the way she winced when she moved. Someone had hurt this woman, and recently. "The baby?" Olivia asked after taking a few sips. "She seems hungry, but otherwise all right," Garrett answered, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "What's her name?" "Lily," Olivia replied, reaching for her daughter. With practiced movements despite her weakness, she arranged the child to nurse. "She's all I have left." Garrett turned away, giving her privacy. "I'll fix you something to eat. You look like you could use it." As he moved around the small kitchen area, Garrett's mind raced with questions. Who was this woman? What had happened to her? Who was she running from? But he kept them to himself. The answers would come in time. What he did know was that something deep inside him, something he thought had died years ago in the war, stirred at the sight of her. A protective instinct that went beyond basic human kindness. "Whoever you're running from," he said quietly as he set a plate of beans and biscuits beside her. "They'll have to come through me to get to you now." Olivia looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for deceit. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. "But you don't know what you're offering." Garrett's jaw set in a hard line. "I don't need to. You're here now, and that's what matters." As the day faded into night, Garrett made a pallet for himself by the fire, leaving his bed for Olivia and Lily. Sleep eluded him as he listened to their quiet breathing, his hand resting on the rifle beside him. Whatever storm had blown these two into his life, he'd weather it. For the first time since returning from the war, Garrett Xander felt like he had something worth fighting for. Morning came with the soft golden light that made Garrett love this harsh land, despite its challenges. He rose quietly, moving about his chores with one ear trained toward the house, listening for any sound from his unexpected guests. In the barn, as he fed his horses and the 2 milk cows that provided his livelihood, he considered his situation. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, Old Man Jenkins, who minded his own business and expected others to do the same. The town of El Dorado Canyon was a good 15 miles south, a half-day's ride at least. They were isolated here, which could be both blessing and curse. Whoever Olivia was running from would have a hard time finding her, but if they did, help would be far away. He was so lost in thought that he didn't hear the door of the cabin open or the soft footsteps approaching the barn. It was only when the old hinge on the barn door creaked that he whirled around, hand automatically reaching for the revolver on his hip. Olivia stood in the doorway, Lily wrapped securely in what looked like a piece of his blanket. She'd washed her face and attempted to tame her hair, though she still wore the same tattered dress. "I'm sorry," she said, taking a step back at his sudden movement. "I didn't mean to startle you." Garrett immediately relaxed his posture, letting his hand fall from his weapon. "No, I'm sorry." "Habits die hard out here," he offered a tentative smile. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she admitted, though the shadows under her eyes told a different story. "Lily slept through the night, which is unusual lately." Garrett nodded, not knowing what to say. He gestured toward the house. "There's coffee on the stove, and I can fry up some eggs if you're hungry." "That's very kind, but I've imposed enough," Olivia said, shifting Lily to her other arm. "We should be moving on." "Moving on to where?" Garrett asked, unable to keep the concern from his voice. "You were half dead when you got here yesterday. Whatever you're running from, you need more time to rest." A flash of fear crossed her face. "It's not safe for us to stay in one place too long. It's not safe for you to leave either, not in your condition." Garrett stepped closer, careful to move slowly. "At least stay a few days. Build up your strength. I've got plenty of food and no one comes out this way much." Olivia hesitated, looking down at Lily. The baby had awakened and was looking around with curious eyes, one tiny hand reaching out to grab at a sunbeam. 2 days, she said finally. "But then we have to move on." Garrett nodded, though something in him rebelled at the thought of them leaving so soon. 2 days, he agreed. "Now, how about those eggs?" As they walked back to the cabin together, Garrett noticed how Olivia kept glancing over her shoulder, how she positioned herself to always have a clear view of the road that led to his property. Whoever she was running from had taught her to be vigilant to the point of paranoia. Inside, as he prepared a simple breakfast, Olivia settled at his small table. Lily rested contentedly in her lap, babbling quietly and playing with the fringe of the blanket. "Your ranch," Olivia said after a long silence. "It's beautiful land." Garrett glanced at her, surprised by the observation. Most people saw only the hardship in this country, not the beauty. "It is," he agreed. "Been mine for 3 years now, was nothing but wild scrub when I bought it. Built everything you see with my own hands." "You live here alone?" she asked, then immediately shook her head. "I'm sorry, that's not my business." "No harm in asking," Garrett said, setting a plate of eggs and the last of yesterday's biscuits in front of her. "And yes, just me. Had a partner for a while, friend from the war. But he got the silver fever, headed up to Virginia City 2 years back. Haven't heard from him since." Olivia nodded, taking a small bite of food. "You fought in the war, Union cavalry," Garrett confirmed. "6 years of my life I'll never get back. When it was over, I wanted space and quiet. Found it here." He didn't mention the nightmares that still plagued him, or how sometimes the sound of a distant thunderstorm could send him diving for cover. Some things weren't meant to be shared with strangers, no matter how beautiful. "And you?" he asked carefully. "Where were you heading before you ended up here?" Olivia's hand trembled slightly as she set down her fork. "Anywhere, nowhere specific, just away." "Away from what?" Garrett pressed gently. She looked up at him then, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and defiance. "My husband." The word hung in the air between them. Garrett's jaw tightened, his eyes drifting to the bruises on her wrists that she tried to hide by pulling down her sleeves. "He did that to you?" The question was unnecessary, but he asked it anyway. Olivia nodded once, her gaze dropping to Lily. "He's a powerful man in Carson City. When I told him I wanted to leave, he showed me how powerful." Garrett's hands clenched into fists. He'd seen men like that during the war, men who confused strength with cruelty, power with control. "Lily's not his," Olivia continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's from my first marriage. Thomas was a good man, a kind man. He died of fever before she was born." She touched the gold locket around her neck. "This was his. It has his likeness inside, the only image of him I have to show Lily when she's older." "And your second husband?" Garrett asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Marcus Fallen," Olivia said, the name like poison on her tongue. "Owner of the Silver Eagle Mine and half the businesses in Carson City. He offered protection, security for me and my unborn child. I thought—" She paused. "I thought he would be kind." The name struck Garrett like a physical blow. Marcus Fallen was indeed powerful, one of the richest men in Nevada territory. His wealth came from silver, but rumors abounded about other, less legitimate enterprises. If Olivia was running from Marcus Fallen, she had reason to be afraid. "When did you leave?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. 3 days ago. He was away on business in Virginia City. I took what little money I had hidden away and fled with Lily in the night." Her eyes met his, fierce despite her exhaustion. "I will not go back to him. I would rather die." Garrett nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of her situation. A man like Fallen wouldn't let his wife go easily. It would be a matter of pride as much as possession. 2 days isn't going to be enough," he said finally. "If Fallen's looking for you, he'll have men searching every town, every road." "All the more reason for us to keep moving," Olivia insisted. Garrett leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "Or all the more reason to stay somewhere he'd never think to look. A small cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere, owned by a man with no connection to either of you." Hope and fear warred on Olivia's face. "You don't know what you're offering. If he finds us here, he won't just kill me. He'll kill anyone who helped me." "I've faced death before," Garrett said simply. "And I'd face it again before I'd send a woman and child back to a monster." The words hung between them, a declaration and a promise. For a long moment, Olivia simply stared at him, as if trying to understand what manner of man would risk himself for strangers. Finally, she nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. Garrett rose from the table, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Don't thank me yet. We've got work to do if we're going to keep you hidden." For the first time since she'd arrived, Olivia's face brightened with something close to a smile. "Just tell me what to do." Over the next few days, a cautious routine developed. Garrett continued his ranch work, tending the small herd of cattle, mending fences, and chopping enough wood to see them through the coming winter. Olivia, despite his initial protests that she should rest, insisted on earning her keep. She proved surprisingly capable for a woman who'd been married to a wealthy man. Her hands, once soft, quickly developed calluses as she took over the cooking, cleaned his long-neglected cabin, and even helped with the milking. "Where did you learn to do all this?" Garrett asked one evening as they sat by the fire, Lily sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle he'd constructed from an old wooden crate. Olivia smiled, the expression transforming her face in the flickering light. "I wasn't always Marcus Fallen's wife, or even Thomas's. I grew up on a small farm outside of St. Louis. My father believed daughters should work as hard as sons." "He taught you well," Garrett observed, watching her nimble fingers as she mended one of his shirts. "He did," she agreed, a shadow crossing her face. "They died in '67, both of them. Influenza. I was 18, alone with a farm I couldn't manage by myself." She shrugged slightly. "Thomas was our neighbor. He'd loved me since we were children," he said. "Marrying him seemed the sensible thing to do." "Did you love him?" Garrett asked before he could stop himself. Olivia's hands stilled for a moment. "I grew to," she said softly. "He was a good man, patient, kind. When he died, I thought my heart would break." Her hand drifted to her locket. "Then I discovered I was carrying his child, and I knew I had to be strong for her sake." Garrett nodded, understanding all too well the need to find strength for others when your own seemed depleted. "And Fallen, how did you come to marry him?" A bitter smile twisted her lips. "I traveled west after selling the farm. I had this idea that I could make a new start in Nevada, where they say women have more opportunities. I found work as a seamstress in Carson City, but it wasn't enough to support myself and a baby." She sighed, setting aside her mending. "Marcus came into the shop one day. He was charming, attentive. When he learned I was a widow with a child on the way, he seemed protective. He courted me properly, spoke of providing a good life for me and my baby." "When did things change?" Garrett asked, though he could guess. "The day we married," Olivia said flatly. It was as if a mask fell away. The charming, gentle man disappeared, and in his place was someone cold, controlling. He monitored every aspect of my life, what I wore, who I spoke to, where I went. Garrett's jaw tightened. "And the bruises? Those came later," she said quietly. "After Lily was born. He wanted a son of his own, was impatient when I didn't conceive immediately. When I suggested that perhaps the problem lay with him." She trailed off, but the implication was clear. "You're safe now," Garrett said firmly, "for as long as you want to stay." Olivia looked at him, really looked at him, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. "Why are you doing this, Garrett? You don't know me. You owe me nothing." It was a question he'd asked himself more than once over the past days. The answer came to him now, simple and true. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said. "And because out here, that's all we have, the choices we make when faced with what's right and what's wrong." She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded, as if accepting not just his answer but something more fundamental about the man he was. Later that night, as Garrett lay on his pallet by the dying fire, he admitted to himself that there was more to it than simple moral obligation. In just a few short days, Olivia and Lily had transformed his solitary existence. The cabin, once just a place to sleep and eat, now felt like a home. The sound of Lily's laughter, of Olivia's soft humming as she worked, had awakened something in him he thought long dead, a yearning for connection, for family. But these thoughts he kept to himself. Olivia was a married woman, technically if not in spirit. And she was running for her life, not looking for love. The last thing she needed was to feel beholden to him for anything beyond safety. Still, as sleep claimed him, Garrett found himself hoping that their time together wouldn't be as temporary as Olivia believed. 2 weeks passed, then 3. October gave way to November, and the first frost silvered the grass around the ranch house. Olivia made no more mention of leaving, and Garrett didn't bring it up. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, working side by side during the day, sharing quiet evenings by the fire. Lily thrived in the peaceful environment, growing stronger and more alert each day. She had begun to pull herself up, cruising along the edge of furniture, her dark eyes so like her mother's watching everything with keen interest. "She's taken to you," Olivia remarked one afternoon as Lily babbled happily in Garrett's lap, tugging at his beard with fascinated fingers. Garrett grinned, gently disentangling the baby's hand from his facial hair. "Reckon she just likes having someone new to torment. Poor thing's been stuck with just you for company all her life." Olivia laughed, the sound still rare enough to make Garrett's heart skip. "She's never known a man's attention before," she said more seriously. "Thomas died before she was born, and Marcus had no interest in another man's child." Garrett looked down at the little girl, who was now contentedly gumming the edge of his bandana. "His loss," he said simply. "She's a treasure." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with something neither of them was ready to name. That night after Lily was asleep, Olivia approached Garrett with unusual hesitation. "I need to go into town," she said, watching his reaction carefully. Garrett stiffened. "That's not safe. Fallen could have men looking everywhere." "It's been nearly a month," Olivia pointed out. "And El Dorado Canyon is small, out of the way. Marcus would focus on larger towns, places with train stations and regular stage-coach service." "Still too risky," Garrett insisted. "What do you need? I can go for you." Olivia sighed, her cheeks coloring slightly. "Women's things," she said. "And proper clothes for Lily. She's growing so fast and winter's coming. Plus, we can't keep wearing your shirts and trousers forever." Garrett had to admit she had a point. Olivia had been making do with his clothes, altered as best she could with needle and thread. The results were functional but far from proper. "Let me think on it," he said finally. "Maybe there's another way." The solution came to him that night. The next morning he rode to the Jenkins place, 5 miles to the east. Old man Jenkins was indeed the mind-your-own-business type, but his daughter Martha was a different story, kind-hearted, practical, and discreet. "Need a favor," Garrett explained after exchanging pleasantries. "Got some relatives staying with me, a cousin and her little one. They came with nothing but the clothes on their backs after a house fire back east." Martha Jenkins, a sturdy woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense manner, nodded thoughtfully. "And you need women's things, I expect. Can't have your cousin wearing your breeches all winter." Garrett smiled gratefully. "Exactly. But she's shy, still upset about the fire, would rather not go into town herself just yet." "Of course not, poor dear," Martha said, her expression softening. "I'm headed into El Dorado Canyon tomorrow anyway. Give me her sizes and I'll pick up what she needs." Garrett handed over a list Olivia had prepared, along with a small pouch of coins. "I appreciate this more than I can say, Martha." The older woman waved away his thanks. "That's what neighbors are for, Garrett Xander. Should bring your cousin and her little one over for Sunday dinner sometime. Might do her good to meet some friendly faces." Garrett promised to extend the invitation, though he knew Olivia would decline. The fewer people who saw her, the better. When he returned to the ranch with news of his arrangement, Olivia's relief was palpable. "That was clever thinking," she said. "Though I hate involving others in my troubles." "Martha Jenkins is solid as they come," Garrett assured her, "and she thinks you're my cousin from back east, staying after losing everything in a fire." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Your cousin?" Garrett shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Seemed simpler than the truth." "And what is the truth exactly?" Olivia asked softly. The question caught him off guard. What were they to each other? Rescuer and rescued, host and guest, friends perhaps, or something more complicated that neither of them had words for yet. "You're—" he began, then faltered. "You and Lily are under my protection. That's all anyone needs to know." Olivia studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Under your protection," she repeated. "Yes, I suppose that's accurate enough." But there was something in her voice, disappointment, perhaps. That made Garrett wonder if he'd said the wrong thing. 2 days later, Martha Jenkins delivered a bundle of clothing and necessities. Olivia was overwhelmed by the older woman's thoughtfulness, not just the basic items she'd requested, but small luxuries like hair ribbons, a soft flannel blanket for Lily, and a jar of rose-scented hand cream. "She didn't have to do all this," Olivia said, running her fingers over the simple but well-made dresses. "That's Martha for you," Garrett replied, pleased by Olivia's happiness. "Heart as big as Nevada." That evening, after bathing in the privacy of the bedroom, Olivia emerged wearing one of her new dresses, a deep blue calico with small white flowers. She'd arranged her hair differently too, swept up at the sides and falling in soft waves down her back. Garrett, who'd been whittling a small wooden horse for Lily, looked up and promptly sliced his thumb. "Damn," he muttered, sticking the bleeding digit in his mouth. "Oh, are you hurt?" Olivia hurried forward, taking his hand to examine the cut. "It's nothing," Garrett said, suddenly very aware of how close she was, of the clean, flowery scent of her. "Just caught me by surprise is all." "What did?" she asked, wrapping his thumb in her handkerchief. "You," he admitted before he could think better of it. "You look different." Olivia's cheeks colored prettily. "A good different, I hope." Garrett nodded, not trusting himself to speak. She looked more than good. She looked like everything he'd never known he wanted. The moment stretched between them, laden with unspoken feelings. Then Lily, who had been playing on a quilt nearby, toppled over and began to fuss, breaking the spell. Olivia stepped away, going to comfort her daughter. Garrett released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. This was dangerous territory they were approaching. Olivia was married. Technically, the fact that her husband was a monster didn't change that legal reality. And yet, as he watched her soothe Lily with soft words and gentle hands, Garrett couldn't deny the truth any longer. He was falling in love with Olivia Forrester. Perhaps had been since the moment she collapsed by his fence. What's more, he was falling in love with her daughter too, this tiny person who now reached for him as readily as she reached for her mother. They were becoming a family, the three of them, in all the ways that mattered. But the shadow of Marcus Fallen loomed over their fragile happiness, a reminder that what they were building might be snatched away at any moment. That night, after Olivia and Lily had gone to bed, Garrett sat by the fire, turning these thoughts over in his mind. He'd never been a man to run from a fight, but neither was he fool enough to underestimate an opponent like Fallen. If when the mine owner traced his wife to Shadow Creek Ranch, he wouldn't come alone. He'd bring men, guns, the full weight of his influence. Garrett was one man with a rifle and a revolver. Good in a fight, sure, but not against those kinds of odds. There were options. They could run, pack up, and head further west, maybe all the way to California or Oregon. But running meant always looking over their shoulders, never putting down roots. That was no life for Lily or for Olivia, or they could stay and fight somehow. But how did one man stand against the power and wealth of Marcus Fallen? The answer came to him as the fire died down to embers. Not one man, a community. People had settled this harsh territory by standing together, by forming bonds stronger than any individual could claim alone. Garrett had kept to himself since buying this ranch, nursing his war wounds both physical and spiritual in solitude. But he wasn't truly alone out here. There were people like the Jenkins family, Sheriff Tom Blackwell in town, other ranchers and miners and shopkeepers who believed in the same simple code he did. Stand up for what's right. Protect those who need protecting. If fallen came when fallen came, Garrett wouldn't face him alone. It was time to stop hiding on this ranch and rejoin the world he'd withdrawn from. With this resolution firm in his mind, Garrett finally sought his pallet by the fire. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd ride into El Dorado Canyon himself. Time to reacquaint himself with neighbors he'd been avoiding for too long. Morning brought fresh determination. After explaining his plan to Olivia, who accepted it with cautious hope, Garrett saddled his best horse, a steady chestnut gelding named Buck. "I won't be gone more than a few hours," he promised. "Keep the rifle close just in case." Olivia nodded, adjusting Lily on her hip. "Be careful," she said, her eyes betraying her concern. "Don't take unnecessary risks on our account." Garrett touched her cheek briefly, a gesture of reassurance that felt both natural and shocking in its intimacy. "I'll be back before you know it." The ride into El Dorado Canyon took just over an hour at a steady pace. The town had grown since Garrett's last visit several months ago. The silver strikes in the surrounding hills had brought new businesses and new faces. He tethered Buck outside the general store and stepped inside, immediately spotting the proprietor, Harold Benson. "Well, I'll be," Benson exclaimed, looking up from his ledger. "Garrett Xander back from the dead. Thought maybe the coyotes got you." Garrett grinned, shaking the older man's hand. "Take more than coyotes to keep me from your coffee, Harold." As he gathered supplies, coffee, sugar, flour, and a few other necessities, Garrett casually inquired about news from Carson City and Virginia City. "Heard anything about that big mine owner Fallen? I think his name is." Benson stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Marcus Fallen. Sure, heard plenty. Man's offering a reward for information about his missing wife. $500, they say." Garrett's heart sank. $500 was a fortune in these parts, more than most men earned in a year. That kind of money would turn neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend. "What's the story there?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "Way I hear it, she ran off with their baby," Benson said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Though some say there wasn't any baby, that she ran off with another man. Either way, Fallen's got men combing every settlement from here to the Sierra Nevadas." Garrett nodded, absorbing this information. "Sounds like a man who loves his wife," he observed neutrally. Benson snorted. "Or a man who doesn't like losing what he considers his property. Fallen's got a reputation, you know. Not a man to cross." After paying for his supplies, Garrett made his way to the sheriff's office. Tom Blackwell was a man Garrett respected, fair-minded, steady, with a strong sense of justice. If anyone in El Dorado Canyon could be trusted with the truth, it was Blackwell. The sheriff was at his desk, reading through wanted posters. He looked up as Garrett entered, surprise giving way to a genuine smile. "Garrett Xander," he said, rising to shake hands. "Been a while." "Too long," Garrett agreed. "Got caught up in ranch work." "Ranch work and what else?" Blackwell asked shrewdly. "Martha Jenkins says you've got family staying with you, a cousin and her child." Garrett nodded slowly. There was no point lying to Blackwell. The man had an uncanny ability to sniff out untruths. "Mind if I close that door?" he asked. "Got something to discuss that's sensitive." Blackwell's expression turned serious. He nodded, and Garrett secured the door before taking a seat opposite the sheriff's desk. For the next half hour, Garrett laid out the whole story: Olivia's escape from Marcus Fallen, her arrival at his ranch, and his growing certainty that she and Lily were in danger. He left out only the deepening feelings between himself and Olivia, though he suspected Blackwell read between the lines. When he finished, the sheriff leaned back in his chair, his face grave. "That's quite a situation you've landed in, Garrett." "Not looking for trouble," Garrett said. "Just want to protect them." "Fallen's not just any man," Blackwell warned. "He's got money, connections all the way to the governor's office. If he wants his wife back, he's got the means to make it happen." "She's not property," Garrett said, his voice hardening. "And she's not going back to a man who beats her." Blackwell studied him for a long moment. "No, she's not," he agreed finally. "But this isn't as simple as right and wrong, Garrett. In the eyes of the law, a husband has certain rights over his wife and child." "Lily isn't his child," Garrett pointed out. "And no man has the right to abuse what's in his care." The sheriff sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "I agree with you, but my badge doesn't give me the authority to interfere in a man's household, no matter how much I might want to." "I'm not asking you to arrest Fallen," Garrett said. "Just, if his men come looking, I need to know whose side you're on." Blackwell's eyes narrowed. "I'm on the side of the law, Garrett, always have been." "And if the law protects a man who hurts women and children?" Garrett challenged. "What then?" For a long moment, the two men stared at each other across the desk. Then, slowly, Blackwell nodded. "If it comes to that," he said quietly, "I'd have to consider whether the law and justice are the same thing in such a case." It wasn't a firm commitment, but it was something. Garrett rose to leave, but Blackwell's voice stopped him. "One more thing, Garrett. There's talk of Fallen hiring Pinkerton detectives to find his wife. Professional men, not just local muscle. If that's true, hiding her at your ranch won't work forever." The news hit Garrett like a physical blow. Pinkertons were thorough, relentless. If Fallen had hired them, it was only a matter of time before they traced Olivia to Shadow Creek. "Thanks for the warning," he said grimly. "I'll keep that in mind." As he rode back to the ranch, Garrett's mind raced with possibilities. They could run, but where? The Pinkertons would follow. They could fight, but against professional manhunters, the odds were slim. There was another option, one that had been forming in the back of his mind for days now. It was risky, potentially dangerous, but it might be their only hope. When he arrived home, Olivia was waiting anxiously on the porch, Lily asleep in her arms. The sight of them worried, vulnerable, yet somehow strong cemented his resolve. "We need to talk," he said as he dismounted. "There's something I need to ask you." Inside, after he'd explained what he'd learned in town, Garrett took a deep breath and took Olivia's hands in his. "I have an idea," he said. "It's not perfect and it's asking a lot of you, but it might be our best chance." "What is it?" Olivia asked, her eyes searching his. "Divorce," Garrett said simply. "File for divorce from Fallen on grounds of cruelty. With witnesses to your bruises when you arrived, with Sheriff Blackwell's support, we might convince a judge." Olivia's face paled. "Marcus would never allow it. He'd kill me first." "Not if we had enough public support," Garrett insisted. "Fallen cares about his reputation, his standing in society. If enough people knew the truth about him, stood with you, he might back down rather than face the scandal." "It's so risky," Olivia whispered. "And even if it worked, who would marry a divorced woman? I'd have no protection, no standing. Lily and I would be outcasts." Garrett swallowed hard, gathering his courage. "You would have me," he said quietly, if you wanted." Olivia's eyes widened. "What are you saying, Garrett?" "I'm saying that I love you," he admitted, the words finally free after weeks of holding them back. "You and Lily both. I'm saying that if you were free of Fallen, I'd marry you in a heartbeat if you'd have me." Tears filled Olivia's eyes. For one horrible moment, Garrett thought he'd misjudged everything, that she didn't feel the same way. Then she squeezed his hands, a smile breaking through her tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have almost since the beginning, but I never dared hope." Relief and joy flooded through Garrett. He pulled her gently into his arms, mindful of the sleeping baby between them. "We'll find a way," he promised, pressing his lips to her forehead. Together, the plan they formulated over the next few days was daring in its simplicity. With Sheriff Blackwell's cautious support, Olivia would file for divorce in the El Dorado Canyon court, citing cruelty and abandonment. They would gather statements from those who had seen her condition when she first arrived: Martha Jenkins, Doc Wilson, who had checked on Lily shortly after their arrival, Garrett himself. Before filing, they would ensure their story was known throughout the community, building a network of support that would make it difficult for Fallen to simply sweep in and reclaim his wife through force or intimidation. It was risky if Fallen learned of their plan before they were ready. He could arrive with armed men and legal papers demanding his wife's return. But hiding indefinitely was no longer an option, not with Pinkertons potentially on their trail. "Are you sure about this?" Olivia asked one evening as they reviewed the documents Blackwell had helped prepare. "Once we start this, there's no going back. Fallen will come for us." Garrett nodded, his jaw set with determination. "I'm sure about you," he said simply. "Everything else we'll face together." The first step was the most difficult: venturing into town together. Garrett had arranged for Martha Jenkins to watch Lily, feeling it was safer to leave the baby at the ranch for this initial outing. Olivia was terrified, he could tell, though she hid it well. Dressed in her blue calico dress with her hair neatly arranged, she looked every inch the respectable frontier woman as they rode into El Dorado Canyon side by side. The stares began immediately. Newcomers were always a source of interest in small mining towns, and a beautiful woman on Garrett Xander's arm was particularly noteworthy. "Chin up," Garrett murmured as he helped her down from her horse. "You've got nothing to be ashamed of." Their first stop was the general store, where Harold Benson's eyes nearly bulged out of his head at the sight of them. "Mr. Benson," Garrett said formally, "may I introduce my friend, Mrs. Olivia Forrester?" He deliberately used Olivia's maiden name, a small act of defiance against Fallen's claim on her. Benson recovered quickly, offering a polite nod. "Mrs. Forrester, a pleasure. What brings you to our little town?" Mrs. Forrester has been staying at Shadow Creek Ranch while recovering from some difficulties, Garrett explained, his tone making it clear there was more to the story. "We're in town today to speak with Sheriff Blackwell about a legal matter." Benson's eyebrows rose with interest. Garrett could practically see the storekeeper filing away this information to share with his next customer. Good. Let the town talk. Let them wonder. After purchasing a few items, including a small wooden toy for Lily, they proceeded to the sheriff's office. Blackwell was waiting for them, his expression grave. "Mrs. Fallen," he said, then corrected himself at Garrett's look. "Mrs. Forrester. I've prepared the papers as we discussed." For the next hour, Olivia gave her statement a detailed account of Marcus Fallen's cruelty, the escalating abuse, and her desperate flight to protect herself and her daughter. Blackwell recorded every word, occasionally asking questions to clarify details. When she finished, the sheriff looked at her with newfound respect. "That took courage, madam," he said. "Not many women would stand up to a man like Fallen." "I'm not standing alone," Olivia said, reaching for Garrett's hand. Blackwell nodded, understanding passing between the men. I'll file these papers with Judge Wilson tomorrow. He's a fair man, believes in the law but also in justice. Once filed, Fallon will be served notice of the divorce petition. And then, Garrett asked, though he knew the answer. And then we wait, Blackwell said grimly. Fallon will come or send men. When he does, we'll be ready. As they left the sheriff's office, Garrett suggested they visit the small cafe on the main street. People need to see us together, see that you're under my protection now. Olivia nodded, though he could feel her trembling slightly at his side. Will it be enough? She asked softly. Will people really stand against a man like Marcus for the sake of a woman they don't know? They'll stand for what's right, Garrett said with more confidence than he felt. And they'll stand with me. I fought alongside some of these men in the war. Others I've helped through hard winters or bad harvests. That counts for something out here. The cafe was busy with the lunch crowd, miners, shopkeepers, ranchers from the surrounding area. Conversation died as they entered, all eyes turning toward the couple. Garrett squared his shoulders, meeting the curious gazes directly. Afternoon, folks, he said clearly. This is Mrs. Olivia Forrester, who's been staying at my ranch while recovering from some troubles. We'd be pleased to join any of you who have room at your table. For a moment, no one moved. Then a grizzled older man, Sam Turner, who ran the livery stable, stood up from his table. Always room for a friend, Garrett, he said, gesturing to the empty chairs. And any lady friend of yours is welcome at my table. It was a small victory, but a significant one. As they sat and ordered coffee, others in the cafe gradually resumed their conversations, though Garrett could feel the weight of curious glances still directed their way. That's Sam Turner, he explained quietly to Olivia. Fought at Shiloh with me. Man's as steady as they come. Turner leaned forward, his weathered face serious. So, what kind of troubles bring a fine lady like yourself to Xander's ramshackle ranch? He asked, direct as always. Olivia hesitated, looking to Garrett, who nodded encouragement. This was why they'd come to tell their story, to build allies. My husband, she said simply. A man named Marcus Fallon from Carson City. Turner's eyes widened slightly at the name. The mine owner. Heard he's looking for a runaway wife. Not runaway, Garrett corrected firmly. Escaped. Olivia came to my ranch nearly dead from exhaustion, carrying her baby daughter, her arms bruised from her husband's hands. The old cavalryman's eyes hardened. That's so? He asked Olivia directly. She nodded, pulling back her sleeve slightly to reveal the faded but still visible marks on her wrist. I feared for my life and for my daughter's future. I couldn't stay. Turner studied her for a long moment, then nodded decisively. Good for you, madam. Man who raises his hand to a woman isn't fit to be called a man at all. His words, spoken loud enough to be heard at nearby tables, sent a ripple through the cafe. Garrett saw heads nodding in agreement, saw the softening in women's faces as they looked at Olivia with new understanding. We've filed for divorce, Garrett continued, making sure his voice carried. On grounds of cruelty. Judge Wilson will hear the case, but we expect Fallon won't give up his wife without a fight. Then he'll have more than one man to deal with, Turner declared, slapping the table for emphasis. Ain't that right, boys? Several men around the cafe voiced their agreement. Garrett felt a surge of hope. This was what they needed: community support, people willing to stand with them against Fallon's money and influence. The rest of their meal passed pleasantly, with Turner regaling Olivia with stories of Garrett's cavalry days, carefully edited for mixed company. By the time they left, several people had stopped by their table to introduce themselves, each offering words of support or simply a friendly welcome to Olivia. As they rode back to the ranch, Garrett felt cautiously optimistic. That went better than I expected, he admitted. Olivia nodded, though her expression remained troubled. They were kind, she agreed. But talk is easy. When Marcus comes with his men and his money, will they still stand with us? It was a fair question, one Garrett had asked himself many times. Some will, he said honestly. Others might not. But we've made a start, Olivia. People know your story now. They know you're not just some hysterical wife who ran from a good husband on a whim. She smiled faintly at that. I suppose not, though I wonder what they think of me staying unchaperoned at your ranch all this time. Garrett chuckled. Probably that I'm the luckiest man in Nevada territory. His expression turned serious. Though we should consider addressing that situation, for propriety's sake. What do you mean? Olivia asked, though something in her eyes suggested she knew exactly what he meant. I mean that if when you're free of fallen, I'd like to make an honest woman of you, as they say. He guided his horse closer to hers, reaching across to take her hand. I love you, Olivia. I want to be a father to Lily, a husband to you, if you'll have me. Tears sparkled in Olivia's eyes, but her smile was radiant. Nothing would make me happier, she whispered, though we have many battles ahead before that day comes. Worth fighting for, Garrett said simply, squeezing her hand before releasing it. Every one of them. The weeks that followed were tense but oddly domestic. News of the divorce filing spread quickly through El Dorado Canyon and the surrounding area. Some people avoided the ranch, unwilling to be drawn into what promised to be an ugly conflict. Others made a point of stopping by with small gifts or offers of help, Martha Jenkins with preserves, Sam Turner to help mend fences, even Harold Benson with a delivery of supplies on the house. Just this once. Olivia blossomed under this unexpected support, growing more confident each day. Lily, now crawling with determined energy, became a favorite with visitors, her sunny nature winning hearts wherever she went. But the shadow of Marcus Fallen loomed ever larger as the date for the divorce hearing approached. Sheriff Blackwell rode out one evening with troubling news. Fallen's received the papers, he reported grimly. Word from Carson City is he's in a fury, threatening all manner of legal action, claiming his wife's been kidnapped or coerced. Will it delay the hearing? Garrett asked, conscious of Olivia listening intently from the kitchen doorway. Blackwell shook his head. Judge Wilson's not easily intimidated, hearing still set for next Wednesday, but he hesitated, glancing at Olivia. But what? She pressed, stepping forward, the sheriff sighed. Fallen's hired a team of Pinkertons, as I feared. And he's gathered a group of men, not just lawyers, but gunmen. They were seen leaving Carson City yesterday, headed this way. Garrett's hand instinctively moved to the revolver at his hip. How many? At least 10, from what my source said, plus the Pinkertons, 3 of them. Olivia's face had gone pale. He'll kill us all, she whispered. You, me, anyone who stands with us. Not if we're prepared, Garrett said firmly, though his mind was racing. 10 gunmen plus Pinkertons against what himself, Blackwell, Turner, maybe a few others. The odds weren't good. Blackwell seemed to read his thoughts. I've sent word to some friends in Virginia City, he said. Men I trust who owe me favors. They should be here by tomorrow night. That gives us a few days to prepare before Fallen arrives. Prepare how? Olivia asked, her voice steadier now. What can we do against so many? The men exchanged looks. First, Garrett said, we get you and Lily somewhere safe. Martha Jenkins has offered her root cellar if needed. It's well hidden, stocked with provisions. Olivia shook her head vehemently. I won't hide while other people risk their lives for me. This is my fight too. Your safety is what matters most, Garrett insisted. Lily needs her mother. And she needs a world where men can't simply beat their wives and expect to get away with it, Olivia countered. I started this fight, Garrett. I won't run from it now. Her determination was both admirable and frustrating. Garrett looked to Blackwell for support, but the sheriff merely shrugged. "The lady has a point," he said. "Besides, Fallen's more likely to negotiate if his wife is present. If she's hidden away, he might just burn the whole area down looking for her." That night, after Blackwell had gone, Garrett and Olivia sat by the fire, planning. Lily slept peacefully in her makeshift cradle, unaware of the danger approaching. "If things go badly," Garrett said quietly, "I want you to promise me something." Olivia looked up from her mending, her eyes serious in the firelight. "What is it?" "Promise me you'll run. Take Lily and get as far away as you can. Martha will help you, get you to the stagecoach with enough money to reach California." "I won't leave you," Olivia said fiercely. Garrett took her hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You will if it means saving Lily. Promise me, Olivia, for her sake." After a long moment, Olivia nodded reluctantly. "For Lily," she agreed. "But it won't come to that. I believe in you, in us." Garrett wished he shared her confidence. As a soldier, he'd learned that belief wasn't enough in a fight. You needed numbers, strategy, luck. Right now, they were short on all three. But looking at Olivia, brave, determined, loving, he knew he'd fight to his last breath to keep her safe, to give her the future she deserved. "Whatever happens," he said, pulling her gently into his arms, "know that loving you has been the best thing in my life. You and Lily. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost in the war." Olivia leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "And you gave us hope when we had none," she whispered. "Whatever happens, Garrett Xander, I will never regret finding your fence to collapse against." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet of the night, finding strength in their connection as the fire slowly died to embers. The next few days passed in a blur of preparations. Sheriff Blackwell's friends arrived from Virginia City, 4 hard-looking men with the unmistakable bearing of former soldiers. Sam Turner brought 2 of his sons, sturdy young men with determined faces. Even Harold Benson volunteered, arriving with a shotgun that looked older than he was, but, he assured them, still shoots true. Garrett surveyed their small force with mixed emotions. These men were risking their lives for a woman most of them barely knew, for principles of justice and decency that many in the territory would consider foolish sentimentality. Their courage humbled him. "We're not looking for a fight," he reminded them as they gathered in his barn the day before Fallen was expected to arrive. "Ideally, we convince Fallen that taking his wife by force would cost more than he's willing to pay. The divorce hearing is set if we can just get Olivia there safely. Let the law take its course. Fallen doesn't strike me as a man who respects the law when it doesn't suit him," one of Blackwell's friends, a taciturn former cavalry captain named Williams, observed. "No," Garrett agreed grimly. "But he does care about his reputation, his standing in society. A public gunfight would damage that, especially if the newspapers got wind of why his wife fled in the first place." They developed a simple but effective plan. Rather than waiting for Fallen to arrive at the ranch, they would escort Olivia into town the following morning, meeting Fallen on ground of their choosing. The town square, with its open layout and multiple buildings offering strategic positions, would give them advantages that the isolated ranch could not. Meanwhile, Judge Wilson had agreed to Blackwell's request to move the hearing forward, recognizing the potential for violence if tensions were allowed to simmer too long. If all went according to plan, Olivia would present her case for divorce tomorrow afternoon, with or without Fallen's presence. That night, Garrett found Olivia in the bedroom, packing a small bag for herself and Lily. "Just the essentials," she explained, folding a tiny dress with trembling hands. "In case we need to, in case your plan doesn't work." Garrett sat beside her on the bed, stilling her movements with a gentle hand. "It will work," he said with more conviction than he felt. "Tomorrow night you'll be legally free of Fallen, and then—" "And then," Olivia prompted when he hesitated. Garrett reached into his pocket, withdrawing a simple gold band, his mother's wedding ring, sent west with him when he left home after the war. "And then, if you're still willing, I'd like to make good on my promise," he said, holding the ring where she could see it. "To be your husband, Lily's father, to build a life with you both, here or anywhere you want to go." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she touched the ring reverently. "I am still willing," she whispered. "More than willing." Garrett slipped the ring into her palm, closing her fingers around it. "Keep this safe for now," he said. "When this is over, when you're truly free, I'll ask you properly." Olivia nodded, tucking the ring into the pocket of her dress. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, their first real kiss, sweet and yearning and full of promise. When they parted, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "We should sleep," he said reluctantly. "Tomorrow will test us all." But sleep proved elusive. Garrett lay on his pallet by the dying fire, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, his mind racing with contingencies, strategies, fears. What if Fallen brought more men than expected? What if the judge ruled against Olivia? What if someone was hurt or worse in the confrontation to come? Dawn found him already up, checking weapons, saddling horses. Olivia emerged from the bedroom with Lily in her arms, both dressed in their best clothes. The baby sensed the tension in the air, fussing more than usual. "She knows something's wrong," Olivia said, bouncing Lily gently. "She's always been sensitive that way." Garrett smiled, reaching out to stroke the baby's soft cheek. "Smart like her mama," he said. "Don't worry, little one. We're going to town today, that's all. Nothing to fuss about." His forced cheer didn't fool Olivia, but she played along for Lily's sake, cooing reassurances as she fed her breakfast. The others arrived shortly after sunrise: Blackwell, Turner and his sons, the men from Virginia City, all armed and grimly determined. They would ride in formation around Olivia and Lily, presenting a united front that would make even Fallen think twice about direct confrontation. "Ready?" Garrett asked as he helped Olivia mount her horse, Lily secured in a sling across her chest. Olivia nodded, her face pale but resolute. "Ready." The ride to El Dorado Canyon was tense, everyone scanning the horizon for signs of Fallen's party. But they reached town without incident, drawing curious stares as their unusual procession made its way down the main street toward the courthouse. Judge Wilson, a stern-faced man with steel-gray hair, was waiting for them on the courthouse steps. "Mrs. Fallen," he acknowledged with a nod to Olivia. "Sheriff Blackwell, gentlemen, I see you came prepared for trouble." "Just being cautious, Your Honor," Blackwell replied. "Mrs. Forrester's husband is expected in town today, possibly with armed men." The judge's expression darkened. "I won't have violence in my courtroom or my town, Sheriff. See that Mr. Fallen understands that when he arrives." "Yes, sir," Blackwell agreed. Though explaining things to Fallen may prove challenging. Judge Wilson harumphed. "I've dealt with men like Fallen before, Sheriff. They respect power, even if they don't respect the law. Show of force may be necessary, unfortunate as that is." He turned to Olivia. "Mrs. Fallen or Mrs. Forrester, as you prefer. I've reviewed your petition. The hearing is set for 2 o'clock this afternoon. I expect all parties to be present and civil." "Thank you, Your Honor," Olivia said, managing a small smile despite her anxiety. The judge nodded, his stern face softening slightly at the sight of Lily peering curiously from her sling. "Cute baby," he observed before turning to go back inside. "Good luck to you all." They established themselves in the hotel across from the courthouse, securing rooms where Olivia and Lily could rest before the hearing. Garrett positioned men strategically, some in the hotel, others in the general store, the saloon, the livery stable. All had clear sight lines to the main road leading into town, ensuring Fallen's arrival wouldn't go unnoticed. Noon came and went with no sign of Fallen. As the hour of the hearing approached, Garrett began to worry. Had Fallen changed his plan? Would he attack the ranch instead, thinking they were still there? Maybe he's not coming, Olivia suggested hopefully as she prepared for the hearing, adjusting her hair in the hotel room's small mirror. He's coming, Garrett said with certainty. He's just making us wait, trying to increase the tension. As if on cue, a commotion erupted in the street below. Garrett moved to the window, his hand automatically going to his revolver. A group of horsemen had ridden into town, at least a dozen men, with Marcus Fallen easily identifiable at their head. Even at a distance, Garrett could see why the mine owner inspired fear. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a carefully trimmed black beard and expensive clothes, he carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. Beside him rode 3 men in dark suits, the Pinkertons, Garrett guessed. The others were a rough-looking lot, clearly hired guns rather than legal representatives. Sheriff Blackwell and his deputies met the group in the middle of the street. Though too far away to hear their conversation, Garrett could see the tension in both men's postures. "He's here," he said quietly to Olivia, who had joined him at the window, "with more men than we expected." Olivia's face paled as she caught sight of her husband. "Marcus," she whispered, unconsciously taking a step back. "He looks angry." "He can't hurt you anymore," Garrett reminded her, taking her trembling hand in his. "You're not alone now," she nodded, drawing strength from his touch. "The hearing starts soon. We should go." Lily, who had been napping on the hotel bed, chose that moment to wake, fussing sleepily. Olivia went to her, lifting the baby into her arms with practiced ease. "It's all right, my love," she murmured. "Mama's here." The simple, tender moment strengthened Garrett's resolve. This woman, this child, they were what mattered. Not Fallen's pride or power, not the potential violence brewing in the street below. "Let's go face him," he said, holding out his hand to Olivia. Together. The courthouse was already crowded when they arrived, word of the confrontation having spread through town. Judge Wilson sat at his bench, his expression stern as he surveyed the packed room. Sheriff Blackwell stood near the door, hand resting casually on his revolver. Marcus Fallen and his men occupied one side of the room, the mine owner's dark eyes fixed on Olivia with a mixture of rage and possessiveness that made Garrett's blood boil. "Olivia," Fallen called, his voice carrying easily across the room. "This foolishness ends now. Come here." Olivia flinched but stood her ground, Lily clutched protectively to her chest. "No, Marcus," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'm here for the divorce hearing, nothing more." Fallen's face darkened. "Divorce? You think I'll allow such a thing?" He looked contemptuously at Garrett. "Is this the man you've been whoring yourself to? Some dirt-poor rancher?" Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the crowd. Judge Wilson banged his gavel sharply. "That's enough, Mr. Fallen," he barked. "You will conduct yourself with decorum in my courtroom, or you will be removed." Fallen subsided, though his glare promised retribution. The formal hearing began, with Olivia presenting her petition for divorce on grounds of cruelty. Her voice wavered at times but grew stronger as she described the escalating abuse, the fear for her safety and Lily's future. Martha Jenkins testified about Olivia's condition upon arrival at Shadow Creek Ranch, the bruises, the exhaustion, the terror. Doc Wilson spoke of examining her, confirming evidence of physical abuse. Garrett described finding her collapsed by his fence, her desperate flight to safety. Throughout, Marcus Fallen sat seething, occasionally whispering to his lawyers or the Pinkertons. His hired guns shifted restlessly in their seats, clearly uncomfortable in the formal setting of a courtroom. When Olivia finished her testimony, Judge Wilson turned to Fallen. "Mr. Fallen, do you wish to respond to these allegations?" Fallen rose, straightening his expensive jacket. "I do, Your Honor. My wife is unwell, prone to hysterics and fabrications. These alleged abuses are inventions of her disturbed mind." "And the bruises?" Judge Wilson asked sharply. "We have multiple witnesses to those." "Self-inflicted," Fallen claimed smoothly, "or perhaps the work of her protector." He spat the last word, glaring at Garrett. "Olivia is my wife. She belongs at home with me, not running around the territory making wild accusations." "I am not your property," Olivia said, her voice clear in the suddenly silent courtroom. "I am a person with the right to live without fear, to raise my daughter in safety." "The child isn't even mine," Fallen sneered. "Why should I care what happens to it?" His callous words shocked even his own lawyers, who exchanged uncomfortable glances. Judge Wilson's expression hardened. "Mr. Fallen, you're not helping your case," he warned. "The court takes allegations of domestic abuse very seriously." "This isn't about abuse," Fallen countered, his voice rising. "It's about a man's right to govern his own household. Every man in this room understands that a wife must obey her husband. The law recognizes this fundamental truth." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, some agreeing, others clearly opposed. Judge Wilson banged his gavel repeatedly for order. "The law also recognizes limits to a husband's authority," he said when quiet had been restored. "Cruelty and physical abuse exceed those limits, Mr. Fallen." For the next hour, the hearing continued, with witnesses called on both sides. Fallen's lawyers presented character witnesses from Carson City business associates who spoke of his standing in the community, his generosity to charities, his impeccable reputation. But none could directly refute the evidence of abuse, the testimony of those who had seen Olivia's condition when she arrived at Shadow Creek Ranch. Finally, Judge Wilson called a brief recess to consider his ruling. As the courtroom emptied, tension filled the air. Garrett stayed close to Olivia, acutely aware of Fallen's murderous glare from across the room. "Whatever happens," he murmured to her, "remember the plan. If things go badly, you take Lily and run. Martha will be waiting with a wagon behind the hotel." Olivia nodded, though her eyes never left Marcus Fallen. "He won't accept the judge's ruling if it's against him," she predicted. "He'll try to take me by force." "Let him try," Garrett said grimly, conscious of the weight of his revolver. "He'll find it's not as easy as he thinks." When court reconvened 30 minutes later, the room was packed to capacity. Everyone in El Dorado Canyon, it seemed, wanted to witness the outcome of this unprecedented case. Judge Wilson's face was grave as he took his seat. "Having considered the evidence and testimony presented today," he began, "I find the petitioner's claims of cruelty to be substantiated by multiple credible witnesses. Furthermore, Mr. Fallen's own statements in this courtroom have revealed an attitude toward marriage that this court cannot condone." Fallen surged to his feet. "This is outrageous," he shouted. "You can't sit down, Mr. Fallen," the judge ordered sharply. "I'm not finished." Reluctantly, Fallen resumed his seat, his face livid with rage. "I hereby grant the petition for divorce," Judge Wilson continued. "Mrs. Forrester is no longer legally bound to Mr. Fallen. Furthermore, she is granted full custody of her child, with no visitation rights for the former husband, who has expressed no interest in the child's welfare." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Divorce was uncommon enough in the territory, A ruling so decidedly in the wife's favor was almost unheard of. Olivia's hand found Garrett's, squeezing tightly. Tears of relief streamed down her face. Additionally, the judge added, Mr. Fallen is ordered to pay alimony in the amount of $50 per month for a period of 1 year to allow Mrs. Forrester to establish herself independently. I will not pay a cent to that whore, Fallen exploded, surging to his feet again. She's my wife, and I'll take her home by force if necessary. One more outburst like that, Mr. Fallen, and you'll find yourself in contempt of court, Judge Wilson warned. And Mrs. Forrester is no longer your wife by order of this court. Fallen's face contorted with rage. He turned to his men, making a sharp gesture that sent them moving toward the doors. This isn't over, he snarled at Olivia. You think some backwater judge can keep you from me? I'll burn this whole town to the ground if that's what it takes. Sheriff Blackwell stepped forward, positioning himself between Fallen and Olivia. That sounds like a threat, Mr. Fallen, he said calmly. I can't allow threats in my town. Your town, Fallen laughed bitterly. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Sheriff. I own judges, governors, senators. One word from me and your career is over. Maybe so, Blackwell acknowledged. But right now, all I see is a man threatening violence in a courtroom. That's against the law no matter who you are. The tension in the room was palpable. Garrett eased Olivia and Lily toward the side door, where Turner's sons waited to escort them to safety if needed. It doesn't have to be this way, Fallen, Garrett said, trying one last appeal to reason. You've lost your wife, but you can keep your dignity. Walk away. Go back to Carson City. Find another woman who actually wants to be with you. For a moment, something like uncertainty flickered in Fallen's eyes. Then his gaze hardened again. No man takes what's mine, he declared. No man. With that, he stormed from the courtroom, his men following close behind. The sound of horses' hooves minutes later suggested they were leaving town, but Garrett doubted the matter was truly settled. We should get you somewhere safe, he told Olivia as the courtroom emptied. Fallen's not a man to accept defeat gracefully. Judge Wilson approached them, his stern face showing unexpected kindness. Mrs. Forrester, he said formally, the divorce is granted as you heard. You're a free woman now, legally speaking. Thank you, Your Honor, Olivia said, shifting Lily to her other arm so she could shake his hand. I can't express what this means to me. The judge nodded, then turned to Garrett. Mr. Xander, I suggest you remain vigilant. Men like Fallen don't distinguish between legal battles and personal ones. He'll see this as a humiliation that requires revenge. I understand, Your Honor, Garrett assured him. We'll be careful. As they left the courthouse, Sheriff Blackwell joined them, his expression concerned. Fallen and his men rode out, he confirmed. But I don't trust that they've gone far, probably planning something. We'll head back to the ranch, Garrett decided. More defensible there than here in town. Blackwell nodded. I'll send a couple of men with you just in case, and I'll keep an eye on the road from Carson City. If Fallen's bringing more men, we'll know about it. The ride back to Shadow Creek Ranch was tense, everyone scanning the horizon for signs of trouble. But they arrived without incident, the familiar buildings a welcome sight after the drama of the day. Home, Olivia sighed as they dismounted. I never thought I'd have a home again after fleeing Marcus. Garrett smiled, touched by her words. This simple ranch, which had once seemed so lonely to him, had become a true home with her and Lily in it. Speaking of home, he said as they entered the cabin, now that you're officially divorced, there's something I'd like to ask you. Olivia's eyes brightened. Yes, Garrett took her hand, mindful of Lily who was beginning to fuss for her evening meal. I know this isn't the most romantic timing, but, Olivia Forrester, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? of making this place a real home for us, for Lily, for any other children we might be blessed with. Tears filled Olivia's eyes, but her smile was radiant. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Garrett Xander, I would be proud to be your wife." From her pocket, she withdrew the ring he had given her the night before. Garrett took it and slipped it onto her finger, a perfect fit, as if it had always been meant for her. "When?" she asked. "I don't want to wait long." "As soon as you like," Garrett replied. "Judge Wilson would probably be happy to perform the ceremony right away after everything we've been through." "Tomorrow," Olivia decided, "if that's not too soon. I don't want to spend another night unmarried under your roof, now that I'm free to change that." Garrett laughed, pulling her gently into his arms. "Tomorrow it is," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Though we should probably post guards tonight just in case Fallen hasn't given up yet." The reminder of the danger still facing them sobered them both. Olivia nodded, her expression turning serious again. "You think he'll really come after us?" she asked. "After the judge's ruling, after everything?" "I hope not," Garrett said honestly, "but we should be prepared just in case." That night, with Blackwell's men keeping watch outside, Garrett and Olivia sat by the fire discussing their future. Lily slept peacefully in her cradle, exhausted from the day's excitement. "I want to expand the herd," Garrett explained, sketching his plans for the ranch. "With another 50 head of cattle, we could make a real go of this place. Maybe build a bigger house eventually with proper bedrooms for the children." "Children?" Olivia asked, her eyes sparkling. "You want more?" "If you do," Garrett said, suddenly worried he'd presumed too much. "I mean, Lily's perfect just as she is, but I thought maybe someday." "I do want more," Olivia assured him, touching his hand gently. "A little boy with your eyes, perhaps, or another girl with your smile." The warmth of her words wrapped around him like a blanket. For the first time since returning from the war, Garrett felt truly at peace, truly hopeful about the future. "We'll build something good here," he promised. "Something that will last." The sound of approaching horses shattered the peaceful moment. Garrett was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle. "Stay inside," he ordered, moving to the window. "Keep Lily quiet if you can." Outside, he could make out at least 5 riders approaching the ranch house, too many to be Blackwell's men returning. His heart sank as he recognized Marcus Fallen at the lead. "Fallen," he called to the men stationed around the property. "5 riders. Be ready." The next few minutes were a blur of preparation, loading weapons, securing doors, positioning for defense. Olivia moved Lily's cradle to the most protected corner of the cabin, then took up Garrett's spare revolver, her face set with determination. "I won't let him take me," she said simply. "Not ever again." "He won't get near you," Garrett promised, his jaw tight with resolve. The riders stopped just beyond the front yard. In the moonlight, Garrett could see that Fallen had indeed returned with a smaller force, just 4 men besides himself, all armed. "Xander," Fallen called out, "send out my wife and maybe I'll let you live." "She's not your wife anymore, Fallen," Garrett shouted back. "The judge made that clear. Go home before someone gets hurt." Fallen's laugh was bitter. "You think a piece of paper changes anything? She's mine. She'll always be mine." "She's her own woman," Garrett responded. "And after tomorrow, she'll be my wife. Legal and proper. There's nothing for you here, Fallen. Let it go." For a moment, silence fell over the ranch. Then, with a roar of rage, Fallen spurred his horse forward, drawing his revolver. "Take them," he ordered his men. "Kill anyone who gets in your way." The night erupted in gunfire. Bullets thudded into the walls of the cabin as Garrett and the others returned fire from their defensive positions. In the chaos, it was hard to tell what was happening, who was hit, who was still fighting. Beside him, Olivia remained steady, her face pale but determined as she kept watch over the back door. "We need to end this," Garrett muttered, more to himself than to her. Fallen's men had taken cover behind the water trough and corral fence, creating a stalemate that could last until dawn or until someone made a mistake. A shout from outside caught his attention. "Fallen's down," one of Blackwell's men called. "Took one in the shoulder." The gunfire faltered, then resumed with less intensity. Garrett risked a glance through the window and saw Fallen being dragged to safety by one of his men. The mine owner was clearly injured but still conscious, still directing his men with furious gestures. "This is your last chance, Fallen," Garrett shouted into a momentary lull in the firing. "Take your men and go before someone dies tonight. Better death than dishonor," Fallen shouted back, his voice strained with pain. "She's mine, I tell you, mine." The obsession in his voice sent chills down Garrett's spine. This was not a man who could be reasoned with, not a man who would ever let go of what he considered his property. "We can't wait them out," he told Olivia grimly. "Sooner or later, one of those bullets will find its mark." "What can we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Before Garrett could answer, a new sound cut through the night: more horses, approaching fast from the direction of town. For one terrible moment, he thought Fallen had brought reinforcements. Then he heard Sheriff Blackwell's voice, authoritative and clear. "Marcus Fallen, this is Sheriff Blackwell with 10 armed men. Throw down your weapons and surrender immediately." The gunfire from Fallen's position ceased abruptly. Through the window, Garrett could see the sheriff and his men, at least a dozen of them, not just the promised 10 surrounding Fallen's position. "This is over, Fallen," Blackwell continued. "You're outnumbered and wounded. Don't make this worse than it already is." For a long, tense moment, Garrett thought Fallen might choose death over surrender. Then, with a string of vicious curses, the mine owner ordered his men to drop their weapons. "This isn't the end," he shouted as Blackwell's men moved in to disarm them. "She'll never be free of me. Never." Garrett stepped out of the cabin, rifle still ready, as Blackwell approached. "Perfect timing," he said with relief. "How did you know?" The sheriff grinned tiredly. "Wasn't hard to guess where Fallen was headed after he left town. Gathered every man I could find and followed as fast as we could." "Good thing, too." Olivia emerged from the cabin, her face pale but composed. "Is it really over?" she asked, looking at the defeated figure of Marcus Fallen, now being bandaged by one of Blackwell's men. "It's over," Blackwell confirmed. "Fallen's going to jail for attempted murder, among other charges. His hired guns, too. Even in Nevada territory, you can't just shoot up a man's home because you're angry about a divorce." "He'll use his connections," Olivia warned. "He has friends in high places." "Maybe so," Blackwell acknowledged. "But attempted murder's a serious charge, and after tonight, his reputation's in tatters. Even his powerful friends might think twice about associating with him." As they spoke, one of the Pinkertons approached a lean, hard-faced man who had not participated in the attack. "Mrs. Forrester," he said, tipping his hat politely. "I owe you an apology." Olivia looked at him with surprise. "For what exactly?" "For my part in tracking you down," the detective said. "When Mr. Fallen hired us, he claimed you had stolen valuable property, that you were mentally unstable. What I witnessed today and tonight tells a different story." He handed her a folded document. "This is my final report to the Pinkerton agency. It states that you were the victim, not the criminal in this case, that Mr. Fallen's claims were false, his actions illegal. The agency won't be pursuing you further." Olivia accepted the paper with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. The Pinkerton nodded once, then turned to join his colleagues who were helping secure Fallen and his men for the journey back to town. "Well," Garrett said as they watched the procession depart. Fallen slumped in the saddle, his face twisted with pain and rage. That's that, I suppose. Yes, Olivia agreed, leaning against him wearily. That's that. Inside the cabin, they found Lily still asleep, miraculously undisturbed by the gunfire and commotion. Olivia checked on her, then returned to Garrett's side by the fire. I believe we were discussing our future before we were interrupted, she said with a small smile. Garrett laughed, the tension of the night finally breaking. So we were, he agreed, pulling her gently into his arms. A future that starts tomorrow when you become Mrs. Xander. Mrs. Xander, Olivia repeated, as if testing how the name felt on her tongue. I like the sound of that. They were married the next day in El Dorado Canyon's small church, with half the town in attendance. Judge Wilson performed the ceremony, his stern face softening as he pronounced them husband and wife. Never seen a couple who earned their happiness more, he commented afterward. May you have many peaceful years ahead. Lily, dressed in a tiny white dress Martha Jenkins had hastily sewn, was passed from arm to arm during the celebration that followed, doted on by what seemed like every woman in the territory. She's going to be spoiled rotten, Garrett observed as yet another admirer presented the baby with a small handmade toy. She deserves it after everything, Olivia replied. We all do. That night, as husband and wife, they returned to Shadow Creek Ranch, their home, their future. And in the years that followed, that future unfolded in ways neither could have imagined on that fateful day when a desperate woman collapsed by a cowboy's fence. Shadow Creek Ranch prospered under their joint care. Garrett's herd grew, as did their family, first with twins, a boy and a girl born less than a year after their marriage, then with 2 more sons in the years that followed. Lily grew into a beautiful, confident young woman who called Garrett father, with the same natural affection as her half-siblings. Marcus Fallen served 3 years in territorial prison before his money and connections secured his release. But by then, his influence had waned, his reputation permanently tarnished. He returned to Carson City a diminished man, and to the Xanders' relief, made no further attempts to contact Olivia. El Dorado Canyon grew alongside them, transforming from a rough mining settlement into a proper town with a school, where Olivia eventually taught, a permanent church, and businesses that served the surrounding ranches. Garrett became a respected voice in local affairs, though he never sought public office, preferring to focus on his ranch and family. But of all their accomplishments, it was their marriage that they cherished most, a partnership forged in crisis, tempered by danger, and sustained by a love that had seemed impossible when a fleeing mother collapsed by a fence, and a cowboy wrapped her in a blanket and called her his. On their 25th anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, Olivia found Garrett standing alone on the porch of the large, comfortable home they had built to replace the original cabin. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, slipping her arm through his. Garrett smiled down at her, the years having added silver to his hair but none of the hardness that had marked him when they first met. "I was thinking about fences," he said. "Fences?" Olivia laughed. "After all these years, you're still thinking about ranch work even during a celebration." "Not just any fence," Garrett explained, pulling her close. "A specific one, the one you collapsed against all those years ago." Understanding dawned in Olivia's eyes. "The best fence ever built," she said softly. "It kept the cattle in and brought me home." "Home," Garrett repeated, the word still holding all the meaning and promise it had the first time she'd used it to describe Shadow Creek Ranch. Yes, that's exactly what it did. As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they stood together in the quietness of shared history, shared love. From inside the house came the sounds of their family laughter, conversation, the squeal of children playing a symphony of the life they had built together. "I love you, Olivia Xander," Garrett said, his voice rough with emotion. "Have from the first moment, will until my last." "And I love you," she replied, resting her head against his shoulder. "My cowboy who wrapped me in a blanket and called me his. It was enough. It had always been enough, and it always would be.